Good evening, everybody. I'm Daniel Benjamin. I'm the president of the American Academy in Berlin. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's presentation, Crossing Disciplines with Pamela Z, this semester's Deutsche Bank Fellow in Music Composition. Let me begin by saying a word or two about the fellowship, and I particularly want to begin by thanking Deutsche Bank, not only for creating the fellowship in music composition, but also for making this evening possible and for allowing us to host you here on the Wannsee. I particularly want to thank James von Moltke up here in the front, good-looking guy, quite commanding. He's here tonight, and he brought other colleagues from Deutsche Bank. In all seriousness, the Academy has few friends as good and as reliable as James von Moltke, and I'm tremendously grateful for his long-term support of the Academy. It is an odd fact that James and I have we actually have a few common ties, but I'll only mention one, and that is a love of something called the brave little state of Vermont in the northeast of the United States. It's where his very justly famous grandmother settled in the 1960s. And so the place is filled with von Moltkes. And I have a home a few miles away from there where I spend the 2 or 3 nights a year I get that I'm not at the Academy. I don't think that Deutsche Bank's generosity owes to that convergence, but if it does, so much the better. Anyway, with this fellowship, funded by Deutsche Bank, the American Academy in Berlin is able to bring one outstanding music composer to Berlin every year. The fellowship was inaugurated in the spring of 2022 with the remarkable composer Du Yun. I remember that first evening in the Palais Populaire when we got together to celebrate her arrival. The following fellows were Tashi Wada in the spring of 23, as well as Camilla Augusta in the fall of 23, and now we have Pamela Z, our spring 2025 fellow. And after these 4 successful cycles, I'm pleased to say that the Deutsche Bank Fellowship in Music Composition is not only shaping the development of some top talents in music, it's also creating some important long-term networks that are in turn influencing musical styles on both sides of the Atlantic. And with this fellowship, we've been fostering some really interesting and unexpected musical partnerships. One of the first was a meeting between former American Academy Fellow Raven Chacon, Du Yun, who would later be a fellow, and Yuval Sharon in the library of the Academy in 2018. I wasn't even here yet, and they had this important meeting. And the project that they discussed became the really acclaimed opera Sweet Land. Another great partnership developed when Tashi Wada collaborated with the Berlin-based Harmonic Space Orchestra and their concert Hour of the Star, which was performed in the Emmauskirche in Kreuzberg in May of 22, became the best attended event of our entire semester with more than 400 people. That was a great scene. And then this year, another such partnership has emerged, and we're pleased that Pamela Z has been invited by the Märzmusik Festival to be one of the 2025 featured composers and performers, and that will be this Wednesday at 9 p.m. at the Festspiel. And I want to thank Camilla Metvali, I hope I'm saying that correctly, the artistic director of Märzmusik, for this cooperation. Camilla could not be here tonight because there's a festival underway, but we look forward to seeing her on Wednesday. I also want to give a very heartfelt thank to Matthias Osterwald, who helped us establish that festival partnership, but who in some sense is also, the father of this entire program as the chair of our jury. So thank you so much, Matthias. And now to our artist of the evening, Pamela Z, or as she is known on this side of the Atlantic, Pamela Z, is a renowned composer, performer, and media artist working primarily with voice, live electronics, sampled sound, and video. And I was chatting with Pamela the other day, and she was saying that she felt sort of, and you can tell me if I'm mischaracterizing, she felt a little left out because she was not focusing on all the nightmares of the moment. She was composing music. And my reaction was, you have no idea how thrilled we are to have someone who is going to divert us from the nightmares of the moment. And after all, that is why we are here as well, because composing music and painting paintings and writing novels and all the rest is the vital work that really needs to go and must go on during our nightmares, and especially here at the Academy. Anyway, Pamela was a student at the University of Colorado. And I've been there, and I can't imagine studying in that place. It's just so nice. She studied classical bel canto vocal technique and music education. After relocating to San Francisco, as happens with so many people who relocate to San Francisco, all hell broke loose, and she had the emergence of this new category defying musical work, which centers on voice and live electronics with performance and multimedia art. Her work uses digital processing and wireless MIDI controllers, don't ask me what that is, that allow her to manipulate sound with physical gestures. Technology is important to her. In a recent interview, she said, "I consider my instruments to be the combination of my voice and the electronics I use." And in just a few minutes, you will see and hear what she means by that. Pamela has prepared a video and sound presentation for us tonight, and creating sound with physical gestures. And I'm looking forward to that. Although she tours regularly as a solo artist and has premiered many large-scale solo works, she has a variety of multidisciplinary commissions and collaborations with visual artists, dance companies, classical musicians, and video artists. She is she's a vertically integrated musical entrepreneur, because she's often heavily involved in the premieres of her work. She's been commissioned to compose scores for dance, theater, film, and chamber ensembles such as the Bang on a Can All-Stars, and I'm really impressed, the Kronos Quartet. Collaborations have ranged from performances with other prominent performer composers, such as Joan LaBarbera, who is also performing at Meeresmusik, to large-scale pieces like the Carbon Song Cycle, co-created with video artist Christina McPhee and an entire chamber orchestra. Pamela Z's work has received support from the American Academy in Rome. We don't hold it against her. Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, Guggenheim Foundation, and she is a recipient of the Doris Duke Artist Impact Award, the Herb Alpert Award, very cool, and the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award, among others. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Pamela just for a little bit of housekeeping. Her presentation, she tells me, will run longer than my staff told me, and that means 40-ish minutes maybe, but don't look at your watch. And if you have questions afterwards, just raise your hand. And if you're joining us via Vimeo, please type your question in the Q&A part of the platform. Pamela, the floor is yours.
I want to make sure it's silent. I would hate to have my embarrassing ringtone come in the middle of the... Okay. Well, I'd like to start by thanking the American Academy in Berlin and by giving thanks to Deutsche Bank for supporting my fellowship. And I want to express what an honor it is to be here with this amazing cohort who have come to feel like a big family to me. Today, I'm going to talk to you about my practice and the ways in which it has expanded over the years to encompass multiple disciplines and approaches. Early in my career, I could have been accurately described simply as a musician, or more specifically, as a composer-performer. But over time, my work has expanded to include many more facets, so that I tend to be variously labeled as composer-performer, chamber music composer, sound artist, installation artist, video maker, intermedia performance artist, and so on. The work I'm best known for involves compositions for my own solo voice with live electronics that I often manipulate with wireless gesture-controlled instruments. And I do live processing and looping of my voice in real time to create layered performance works that are sometimes rhythmic and sometimes more abstract or ambient in nature. And I frequently use projected image, which is also sometimes manipulated in real time. Just to give you a taste, here's a little collage of excerpts from performances over the years.
Sa shi su se so ta chi tsu te to na ni nu ne no ha hi hu he ho ma mi nu ne no ya yu yo da bi bu re no wa o a I u e.
Exchanging polite greetings and talking about your country, where you live now, talking about your family members, visiting Japanese friends or acquaintances. Dear pen pal, my computer is broken. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to write, but as you can see,
So I should talk a little bit about the instruments or tools that I use to perform my work. I always say that I consider my instrument to be the combination of my voice and the electronics that I use. And when I first started doing live processing on my voice and playing sampled sounds in performance, I was using separate hardware devices. Including a stack of 19-inch wide digital delay units, outboard multi-effects processors, and a rack mountable sampler, all mounted in a portable but very heavy 6-space rack with a big old Mackie mixer board sitting on top. And everything was patched together with a rat's nest of spaghetti spilling out of the back of the rack. But after years of hauling this heavy rig around and often paying hundreds of dollars in overweight luggage fees, I finally decided in 1999 to begin porting all of my electronics functions into software using a program called Max MSP on an Apple PowerBook. Um, So I began the process of building a Max patch to host all of the processing duties that had been handled by the rack full of gear. And I even named them after the software delays after the hardware that they were replacing. So this is an image of what the patch has evolved to look like today. So I also make extensive use of gesture-controlled instruments in performance, and these instruments are all sensor-based and tend to use elements repurposed from other applications, including medical devices or security technology. The earliest gesture controller I had was the one you saw in the first work sample I showed you, with the black elastic bands around my arms. It was called the body synth and had electrode sensors much like the ones used in hospitals for taking EKG measurements and such. And these days, I'm working with several newer controllers. One of them uses ultrasound. Another uses infrared light. And I have a wearable controller called MIM that uses accelerometer, gyro, and electromagnetometer. Basically the same kinds of sensors that are found in your phone. And they measure the X, Y, and Z axes of my hand movements. And sometimes I even use a camera on my computer for as a controller. And all of these sensors just generate numbers, which are converted to MIDI, which is a musical instrument digital interface. And this is a protocol by which electronic instruments and computers exchange messages and commands about note numbers or other parameters like volume or pitch bend. And I use them to trigger sampled sounds and manipulate the processing on my voice, or even to manipulate projected video. So when I first started doing these works for voice and electronics, my pieces tended to be short, almost pop song length, like 4 to 7 minute little works that I would perform as a kind of a suite to make a concert. But over the years, I became enamored of multimedia experimental theater and performance works and began wanting to work in longer forms. So I started making full evening length pieces by working in a kind of modular way. I would choose a very large general subject to build the work around, and then create little segments or vignettes that I would hold together with things like projected image and fixed media text sound collages as a kind of glue. I deliberately chose very broad, open-ended ideas so that I'd be free to kind of go anywhere in exploring them. In the 1990s, I made a work about language called Parts of Speech, which took the shape of a sound work and then a performance work and an installation. I made one called Gaijin in 2001 about the concept of being a foreigner in the place where you live. And you actually saw an excerpt from that in the first work sample that I showed you. And that piece involved myself and 3 Butoh dancers, Shinichi Yovakoga, Kinji Hayashi, and Lee Evans. And I made a number of other large-scale performance works after that. And then in 2010, I made a piece called Baggage Allowance, exploring the concept of baggage in both literal and metaphorical senses. It was the most ambitious work I had made to date because it included a full evening performance work, a gallery exhibition with sound and video embedded in objects, and I even created a browser-based installation that was designed to be experienced online. In any case, here are some of the short excerpts from the San Francisco and New York premieres of the performance iteration of Baggage Allowance.
Use caution when opening overhead bins. Items may have shifted during flight. Unknown person, unknown person, unknown person, unknown person, unknown person, unknown person. Did you pack your own bag? Unknown person. Did any unknown person ask you to carry something? Unknown person, unknown person. Has your bag at any time been out of your immediate control? Person. What is the purpose of your travel? Unknown, unknown.
2 pants, 2 or 3 shirts, camisoles, maybe another jacket, a vest. I usually always have a vest.
Either warm or wet clothing, 1 or 2 pair of blue jeans folded, and sometimes a pair of pajamas.
1 or 2 skirts, 1 pair of dress pants, 1 pair of jeans, maybe 1 sexy nightie, depending on what's going to happen.
Socks.
And socks.
6 pairs of socks. Just enough socks and underwear.
See, I almost forgot the socks.
Sorry. Thank you. So by this time, I had already expanded my practice to include sound and video installation. And actually, the first aspect of Baggage Allowance that I conceived was the installation. I was offered a solo exhibition at the Krannert Museum in Illinois, which had its premiere or its opening in January of 2010, several months before the premiere of the performance work. The installation had 7 pieces, mostly involving objects with sound and video embedded. And they were bag x-ray, weeping steamer trunk, suitcase, Holly's patent, a single channel baggage allowance video, sonic suitcases, and tape loops. So as people would enter the gallery, they would be confronted by the bag x-ray, and they were asked to place their bag on the belt. And then I had designed the software to grab an image of their bag, but insert unexpected objects that they didn't think were in there. And so I made a database of objects for the computer to choose from based on size appropriateness for the bag. And there were lots of different things in that database, including there were all kinds of objects, including like weapons. There were just like even a chest x-ray with a beating heart, live animals, an Emmy Award, and then tools, all kinds of things that would just appear in people's bags when they used the bag x-ray. Then I had another piece in that show that was called the Weeping Steamer Trunk. And this was made with an old antique wardrobe trunk of the variety that people actually used to travel with. And I was kind of amazed that these were considered luggage in the old days, because this one weighed like 75 pounds empty. They were like more like furniture than luggage. But what I did was I embedded sensors in the drawers so that people could open and close the drawers of the trunk, and they would be presented with not only objects inside of the drawers, but also they would get sound and image that were embedded in speakers, and a sort of cameo-shaped display that was in the lid of the trunk. And there were all kinds of objects, sometimes more normal things like just a locket and a pair of gloves. And then other times they would open the drawer and find something very strange, like a very tiny model of a Victrola, which, so there's the little Victrola. And when they opened that drawer, they would hear the sound of vinyl surface noise and an opera singer. There was one drawer filled to the top with hair, and that guy's kind of, he's a little bit brave. He's touching the hair. And there were other things like just, old family photographs and so on. It was a little tricky to get people to actually open and close the drawers, because people are trained not to touch the artwork in a gallery. So I had to have a lot of signage that said, please very gently open and close the drawers of this trunk. And then I had another piece in that show called Suitcase, which is kind of my favorite of all of the pieces in that show. And I've actually shown it in other exhibitions, like group exhibitions after that. But it was, for some reason, one of the most affecting to people. People would at once find it to be kind of charming, but also creepy. I think the creepiness factor came from the scale, because it was a very small suitcase, like 24 inches wide, but yet they'd walk up and look down and there was like a grown woman asleep in the suitcase. And sometimes when they leaned down to look into the suitcase, I would actually wake up and look right at them. And more than one person sort of shrieked when that happened. That there was also a sound element to that piece, which was just a sort of my voice muttering and chattering, all the things that you sort of worry about when you're trying to get to sleep and can't. So there's several other pieces that were in that show, but I'm not going to show you all of them for time's sake. But if you're curious, you can go to my website and go to the works section of my website, and then look for installations. And then there's more documentation of all the other pieces that were in that show. So back in 2007, I was commissioned to make a video and sound installation for a new media gallery called Recombinant Media Labs in San Francisco. It was an immersive setup in a room that was 24 feet by 36 feet with 10 frame-locked channels of video projected on 12-foot wide HD screens mounted edge to edge, with 3 screens on each side of the room and 2 screens on the ends of the room, and 16 channels of surround audio. I wanted to make something that was site-specific to that room, so I created a piece called Sonic Gestures using video of gestures associated with sound. It was on an 18-minute loop with 4 sections, including one with extremely slowed, like time-stretched hand claps, and another with long gestures, sometimes resulting in a 36-foot-long arm reaching across 3 screens. And then there was this kind of fragmented, chattery section featuring my 2007 not very smart phone. And then I created, for some reason, I made this crazy section called the long URL.
extremely long ampersand dash caret dash stick equals you might want to write this down, comma, all one word, plus sideways frowny face, colon, open parentheses. Unknown character, comma, triple forte, / at symbol, caret, greater than, memory, dash access, m dash, exception, system failure, invalid name, invalid characters waiting for, underscore, remote debugger connection.
And of course, all that text that you're hearing was whipping more and more rapidly around the heads of the viewers through the gallery's surround speaker system. So, although my work over the years has begun to have some presence in the space of visual arts, it's not so much a shift as an expansion of what I do. I'm inspired and influenced by works of great artists all across the spectrum of disciplines. And when I get excited about something I see, I often want to dive into that world. But through all this broadening, sound tends to remain at the center of my work, and the human voice and speech sounds are central to that. Often when I start a new work, the first thing I do is record interviews with a number of people, and then use that interview material both as inspiration for making the work and as actual sonic material that I use to compose the music. This method is part of the process I'm using to make my Berlin Prize project, Arbeitsklang. In this case, I plan to use found sounds sampled from various workplaces in Berlin, as well as sampled speech sounds taken from recorded interviews that I'll do with the people working in those spaces. One of the aspects of speech sound that I find delightful is the fact that it's full of pitches and rhythmic material that can be harvested for use as notes and rhythmic figures in a musical composition. To illustrate the way I like to work with these speech fragments, I'll play for you an audio excerpt from a piece I made called Memory Trace.
But I can't remember.
I can't remember that.
I don't remember.
I don't know what I was doing exactly.
After that,
well, yeah.
Remembering.
I can't remember.
They all remember.
He remembers. He remembers. He remembers. He remembers. He remembers coming towards me.
I
remembered us.
I remember.
Oh, I can't remember now.
Wasn't sure that I remembered my boyfriend's.
Form or shape.
Well, yeah.
And an apple. And an apple. And an apple. And there was a green apple. And an apple. And there was a green apple.
Apple store. Got him an iPod Touch.
And opened it and there was a green apple. And I we passed my and I dreamt, and it was drizzling.
A clear memory, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I make lists.
I love lists.
I certainly make plenty of
I
lists.
always
I
make
never
lists.
keep all
I
those
only made
lists.
3 lists.
For making lists.
I go through
definitely make
periods of my
lists.
life where I don't have lists.
I am notorious for making lists.
I was in a car on a slippery slope.
I was in a plane and it started going down.
Before that, I was painting.
And I was with my sister.
Couldn't really prove who I was. I think I was like 12. I was about to leave a comfort zone of sorts. I was sleeping on the floor. I think I was trying to call my dad. Am I prove who I was? I think I was
confused about why I was coming here.
I was a spy in a past life.
I don't know what I was doing exactly.
After that,
remembering.
I can't remember.
They all remember.
After that,
So, in recent years, I've had a fair number of commissions from chamber ensembles, and as a result, I've composed quite a few chamber works. Some composed for a chamber ensemble plus my voice and electronics, some for just the ensemble to play acoustically, and most involving some sort of electronics, whether it be live processing that I do on the ensemble themselves or a fixed media part that they play along with. One distinction that there is between my solo voice and electronics works and my chamber works is that I tend not to formally notate my solo performance pieces, but my chamber works always have a written score. Both types of work are composed to have specific set structures, but I always learn the solo works as I create them, so I don't really need a score. Whereas with the chamber works, a score is necessary in order to transmit the instructions for playing the piece to the ensembles. And the score is generated as a part of the process of composing the work. In 2012, I was commissioned to compose a work for Kronos Quartet, which was written for string quartet and tape, as we still like to call it. The piece was about speaking accents, specifically accented English. And I interviewed people from many regions in the US, from other English-speaking countries, and people who spoke English as a second language. The tape part was composed of fragments of their speech and was derived from pitches and rhythms in those speech samples. The piece was in 12 micro movements, and I'll play you just a short excerpt from the first movement of my work for Kronos Quartet. This is just audio from the live recording of Kronos at the premiere.
Born. I was born.
I was born.
Born.
I was born.
I was born. I was born.
I was born in Ireland, Tipperary.
I was born in Japan.
I was born in
South Korea.
I was born in Fort Smith, in Western Australia.
I was
A
born
city called
in Milwaukee,
I was born in
Wisconsin.
Paris.
My father was born
over in Berkeley.
I was born in Oakland County.
I was born in a very, very small little town or village, almost in south Sweden, called Laholm. Called Laholm. Called Laholm. Called Laholm. Called Laholm.
So another string quartet that I composed was commissioned by a group called Del Sol Quartet in 2016. It's called Attention, and I composed it for string quartet, mobile devices, and a fixed media part that's not just audio, but actually incorporates a video that I made. And in a few places, specifically at the opening and closing of the piece, the video actually serves as a graphic score for the quartet. In this piece, I was thinking about the ways in which our focus and attention are constantly challenged by endless notifications and nonstop communications feeds. And the piece requires the quartet to make their way through the score in the face of a series of mounting interruptions. The players are forced to split their attention, navigating distractions and also in distracting one another as they sort of multitask their way through the piece. At the premiere, I made use of the Exploratorium's Meyer constellation system to deliver beeps and bloops of text alerts and notification tones throughout the house, so that at times audience members feared that the sounds might be coming from their own devices. In this section, the violist receives a text indicating a change in the score. And there's even a section in which the cellist's phone starts ringing, and she actually decides to take the call while trying to continue playing the piece. So throughout my career, I've composed a lot of scores for dance and film. I've been commissioned by many choreographers over the years, including people like Joe Kreiter, whose company is known for a very athletic kind of aerial dance that Joe refers to as apparatus-based dance. And Mary Armentrout, an experimental choreographer who makes performance installations that often actively involve the audience. In 2011, I was commissioned by Brenda Way, the artistic director of ODC Dance, to score a piece for her company. In this score, I make a lot of use of two devices I'm quite fond of in my work: found text and alphabetized lists. I've always loved lists, especially alphabetized ones. I find them to be tremendously poetic because of the sonic properties of the kind of repetition and gradual morphing that occurs within them. It's a bit like rhyme, but in my opinion, it's almost better than rhyme because it's less predictable. Brenda made a substantial 25-minute piece called Waving, Not Drowning, for which I composed a lot of new music, and the score also used a little of my existing work, including my found text piece, Pop Titles You. Here's just a few minutes of excerpts from Waving, Not Drowning.
La lingerie, les lunettes, le luxe, le maquillage, les mannequins, les manteaux, les maris, la mode, les montres, les navettes photographiques, la plage, la planification, la pluie, la posture, la prospérité. You stand out. You started laughing. You started me dreaming. You started something. You started something. You stayed away too long. You stayed on my mind. You stepped into my life, loving me. You sure got this old redneck feeling blue. You sure know how to party. You sure know how to use the things you use. You sure love to ball. You sure make cheating seem easy. You sure tell it like it is, George Jones. You take a little bit of it home. You take me for granted.
Coats, cocktails, color, comfort, daughters, dinners, discretion, dresses, earrings, expecting, fashion, figures, funerals, gadgets, gestures, girlfriends, glasses, gloves, grooming, hair.
So I was awarded the Rome Prize in Music Composition in 2019, and I was in Rome from September of 19 through March of 2020, when my fellowship year was truncated by the start of the pandemic. I was going there to work on a piece called Simultaneous, exploring ideas around synchronicity and simultaneity. I started the work, as I often do, by conducting a lot of interviews, attempting to interview all the Rome Prize fellows, and as well as residents and some staff. Although I wasn't able to finish my project while there, I did manage to create an installation work using a lot of speech samples from the interviews I recorded. I installed 21 speakers in the cryptoporticus of the American Academy in Rome, and I created a spatialized, immersive sound work for the Academy's annual Cinque Mostre exhibition.
Very much overlapping.
Different layers.
Very, very much overlapping.
Different layers. Different layers.
And so,
So.
strange.
Strange.
So usually,
And she and I realized that we were both wearing the same, in that moment, like the same exact pair of flannel pajamas with penguins on them.
I had a dream about a very dear friend who I don't speak to very
con cui
often.
non parlo molto spesso.
He was a friend from college.
Era un compagno di
We were very close.
college, eravamo molto amici.
So I was originally scheduled to present Simultaneous at MoMA in New York in the end of my Rome Prize Fellowship year. But due to the interruption of the pandemic, my New York engagement was postponed. But happily, I was invited to do a studio residency at MoMA in the summer of 2023, and I was able to complete and show the work then. I installed my 21 speakers in the gallery there and presented a version of Simultaneous that involved multi-channel sound installation combined with a performance work. With a chamber ensemble, my voice and electronics, and multiple channels of projected image.
Sort of the same
language?
Almost exactly the same.
Same building.
At the same time.
More or less at the same time.
A lot of things at the same time,
at the same time. Different layers. Different layers.
At the same time.
different layers, the same language.
So I think I'll finish by telling you about a work that premiered in the heart of the lockdown. I created a work called Ink for the San Francisco Bay Area Chamber Chorus Volti that was actually commissioned with the idea that it would have an online premiere. And I designed the work with the streaming platform in mind. It's a work in 5 sonically distinct movements that variously use standard notation, graphic elements, and instructions to transmit the sung and spoken vocal material. Speech fragments from interviews with the Volti singers make up a portion of the sonic structure and determine some of the work's melodic and rhythmic passages. The final movement is structured as what would seem like a fairly standard SATB fugue. But as the movement progresses, some anomalous features begin to appear. The pages begin to look as if the inkjet prints got water spilled on them, and blots of ink begin obscuring the music. And the choristers are asked to interpret those ink blots vocally for the durations of the passages they cover, and then just jump back into what's notated whenever it becomes clear again. At one point towards the end, the music is almost completely obscured and taken over by ink blots before it finishes with a splattery little flourish at the end. So I'll share with you some short excerpts of from the beginning and end of this movement, so you can hear the choristers interpreting the ink blots. I've actually displayed the pages of the score as part of the graphics of the video.
Millions of microscopic droplets of water may stick, but this is rhythm that makes them under the paper. Doesn't photographic sticks, but is
And then just moving to the end of the movement.
is not as sharp or as clear. Jet-a-light, at least before it
Thank you very much. So speaking of graphic scores and non-conventional notation, I think I'll just end with, I'll show you the little bit of the second movement of the piece, which uses another kind of visual information as score. And then we'll move on to questions and answers.
blink, 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 blink. Blink.
Thank you very much. I don't have Dan here, but you're welcome to ask questions if you have any. Oh, you did.
And she seems like such a nice, normal lady in person, too. You're not just an incredible avant-garde au courant artist, you're also a student of your fields and your traditions. If you could invite any great historical musicians or artists from the past to your concert, to a concert of yours, who would it be and what would they think?
Oh my goodness. Well, that's one that kind of takes time, right? I have to think. That's a big decision. I can't just pop a name out right now. I don't know. John Cage. Let's say John.
Pamela, is it working? Yes. How much is your work influenced by the invention of the theremin instrument?
Well, I love people always. So the gesture control instruments that you saw, especially the little one where I was moving near it like this, people always want those to be a theremin. Every time I play, people come up afterwards and ask, "Oh, can I play your theremin?" Or, "Oh, is that a theremin?" And yes, the theremin. I think maybe not so much me, but the people who have created all the gesture controlled instruments that have followed the theremin are definitely influenced by its existence. I don't know how many people in here are familiar with that instrument, but the main difference between the theremin and the gesture control instruments that I use is that the theremin itself was a synthesizer. And is, I mean, a lot of people still actually have them and use them, but a theremin is a synthesizer, which means that it generates its own sound. It has an oscillator, and it only has one voice, which sounds kind of like a musical saw. It's like, the instruments that I play. What they have in common with the theremin is that you also play them by not touching them. But the difference is my instruments are they're MIDI controllers. And so what that means is that they don't make any sound by themselves. What they do is they make messages to tell something else to make a sound. And so for each piece, and sometimes each section of the piece, I have to program the computer to decide how to interpret the numbers that come from my gestures. So the sensors are picking up my gestures and they're generating numbers. Those are going to the computer. And then in each section of the piece, those numbers are doing something. Sometimes they're making note numbers. Sometimes they're just triggering samples. Sometimes they're manipulating the processing on my voice. But they can sound, the sound that you can get from using them can be different for each time you use them. And sometimes it's not even sound. Sometimes I'm actually manipulating the video that's projected in my work. So, but yeah, the theremin's super important.
I got a question here. Two-part question. Technology develops so quickly. Are you constantly keeping up with the new developments in technology? And once you find something, is there a process that you go through to go from knowing the instrument into finding artistic inspiration with it?
Well, I would say that the very rapid changes in technology these days are both extremely helpful to the work, but often a curse, because I spend countless hours just fixing things, just trying to keep up with the changes in the compatibility between what I'm using and the OS, the new OS. Like suddenly there's a new operating system and it doesn't support the thing I was working on before, so then I have to construct it until it does work. So I actually am annoyed by how rapid the changes are. And just because I think that it's become such an industry that it's all about just making changes every 3 or 4 months, just because then people have to buy new things and they make more money. And so that can be a pain. And so the short answer is, yeah, I've gotten a lot of good out of that, but I've also had spent lots of hours just trying to fix things that break. And I'll make an admission. How many people know what max MSP is? Okay, there's a good number of you. Well, here's an admission. I am still running max 5 on my on my performance instrument. And it's because I cannot find the time to migrate to the latest version of Max, because when I do that, everything will break and it will take me months to get it working again. And I play all the time, so I don't have time. So I now have this parallel machine that I've been trying to bring up to date. And meanwhile, the one that I go out and perform with still runs this very old version of Max. But anyway, that's sort of a quasi answer to your question. I think Adam had, or somebody who has the mic.
Yeah. Thank you. That was really, really wonderful.
Thank
Not sure I would call this a talk. It was more like an experience, an event. Like March 24 is historic already. I wanted to ask you a question about technique and expression, because I think that a lot of people assume that the technology in art, particularly music perhaps, takes us away from something fundamentally human, and that extended techniques, avant-garde techniques, are inaccessible. And it seems to me that you have drawn on technology and also on certain techniques that we might call Cajun, or to explore something that's actually much more deeply human, a kind of ghost in the machine. And I mean, we could hear people laughing in recognition when they heard some of the excerpts that you were showing. So I'm wondering, you started out as a singer-songwriter, and I'm wondering, what was it that attracted you to these techniques? Did you find that they allowed you to express something that you weren't able to express in the kind of music that you started out doing?
I think it's just an evolution of my artistic sensibility. I just outgrew what I was doing, and there was a moment where I just sort of woke up one day and realized that I was playing music professionally. I was playing like between 2 to 6 nights a week in clubs, and I realized that the music that I was playing on my gigs was completely different than what was on my turntable. And I was just really engaged with experimental music and contemporary classical music, and that wasn't what I was doing. And so it was an active choice of mine to shift the focus of the way that I worked to match what was interesting to me. So really, I guess the answer to your question, if the question is what caused me to make that shift, it was because I just made that shift. Aesthetically, that's what was interesting to me. And so I had to follow what was interesting to me. I couldn't continue making work that I was no longer that engaged with, I guess.
Hi, Pam. Is this on? Hello. Yeah, it was great talk. Really great, Pamela. Process question, two parts. One, you get a commission. How do you decide whether or not you're going to take that commission, or what in the commission will inspire you? And secondly, once you sit down at the keyboard or the piano, what comes first? The noise, the pictures, or the tape? No, what happens? What goes on in your mind?
Okay, so let's see. Part one, how do I decide? I think the kinds of soloists and ensembles that tend to commission me are already of like-minded. So, I mean, I can't remember somebody trying to commission me and me saying, "Oh no, I don't want to make anything for you." So basically, I take the commissions when they come. And then what makes me decide how to begin working on the piece depends a lot on what the commission is, because the commissions really range from people who just give me completely free rein. So sometimes, let's say it's a chamber ensemble, and let's say it's a sextet, which has a certain instrumentation. Like a Pierrot ensemble or something like that. That sometimes they come to me and they say, "This is us. This is our instrumentation. Make us something." And then I get to decide, as long as it's something that ensemble could play. I get to decide, what it is. Other times people come to me and say, "I have this project and it's about this." And so like right now I have a commission from a pianist named Sarah Cahill, and she's making a whole set of works that are homages. So she said, "I want you to make me something, but it just needs to be an homage." And she said, "It doesn't matter. It could be an homage to another composer. It could be an homage to anything that you want. It could be an homage to democracy." Uh, Whatever you want it to be, but it has to be an homage. And so, it just depends. And then a lot of the commissions come from choreographers. And often when I get a commission from a choreographer, I then feel more like I'm making work that is in service of their work. And so I tend to need to make it's all same when I get from a filmmaker who wants me to score their film. It tends to not be so much a collaboration as it is a collaboration in that I'm creating the part I'm creating, but they are driving it. They're saying, "This is what the dance is about. This is what I want. This is the duration. These are how many sections there are. This is the kind of tempi that I want in different places." And so I sometimes get very clear instructions from the commissioner, and other times I'm given free rein, and then I just try to imagine what would be interesting on that group. I just finished a commission for an ensemble called Load Bang out of New York, and it's a very unusual ensemble. It's 3 wind players and a baritone singer. And it's like 2 brass, a 1 reed, like a bass clarinet, and a baritone singer. And it's just such an unusual combination of, it's different than something I've ever written for. I've written a lot of string quartets. I've never written something for that ensemble. So the fun for me with that was just approaching like, what would sound interesting on those instruments? And also that the baritone singer, I'm like, well, I'm a singer, but I have a different range than he has. So making something on my own voice and then transposing it somehow into, and thinking in terms of like his range. So that was what sort of drew me into making that piece. It's different with every piece.
That was fantastic. Really, really provocative. And I'm really fascinated by these solo gestural works. And I'm wondering if when you perform them, are they ever the same twice? And if they're not, then do you see yourself as creating a unique work of art each time, the way that a painter makes a painting or a monoprint, and it's essentially not really reproducible? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself in that camp, sort of like a crossover to a visual artist?
Well, that I get that question a lot. Usually it takes the form of, is it improvised or is it composed? And so to answer it that way, most of my works, even my solo, like all of the works that I wrote for other people, are through composed, and they're going to sound the same every time they're played. Most of the works that I write for myself are also, that's Ken. What? Hello. Sorry, you guys. Sorry. I'm just like, I've been looking at you all night and I just realized, hi. We'll talk later. Sorry. I was surprised by the presence of someone. All right. So, improvisation versus composition. Most of my solo works are also composed, and they're structured in such a way that if you go and see 2 concerts in a row of me solo, you will recognize the pieces from the last time that I played them, because they are the same pieces. However, a lot of them have built-in sort of structured improvisational elements. So parts of them might change a little bit each time I do them. And even some places I can stretch it a little bit, and or depending on my mood or how it feels like it's being received or whatever, but they are mostly completely composed. And then often I will do like one completely improvised thing in a concert of otherwise composed works. Sometimes it's the encore, because people will call me back for an encore, and I'll be like, oh, I already did all the things I was prepared to do. I guess I'll make something up. And so sometimes I'll do an improvised thing then. But most of the things are really pretty much composed. But it is funny about this sort of structured improvisational thing. Just to give you a little story about one piece. I had this piece that was in my repertoire for years called Bone Music. And it had this kind of ABA structure where it started out with, I made these 3 samples of a 5-gallon plastic water bottle and created this sort of polyrhythmic sort of bass that was underneath what I was doing. And then I would sing this melody, which is a very specific melody. I always sang it the same way. It had the same duration. And then I would follow that by this section where I would just start doing this wild sort of chattering in like a fake language. And that would be processed so that my voice was building up and becoming this big chattery thing. And then I would stop that and jump back into the melody. And it sort of went back and forth like that. So those chattery sections were very improvised, but they were prescribed to be at that specific part of the piece. But I was just making it up as I went along. And I was sort of singing in this kind of fake language that wasn't really a language. And but then something happened, which is I recorded the piece and it came out on a CD of mine. And so after months of like working on the recording and then mixing it and mastering it and listening to it over and over again, I learned the chattering. And it was kind of like, how like when a rock band has a guitar solo in one of their songs and then it becomes a hit, and then when they go out and play, the poor guitarist has to play the exact solo that's on the record because everybody wants that solo. And so I sort of did that to myself. I like learned this. It was just like I was making certain points. It was like, and it was like it became like this really specific thing. So I knew exactly what that chattering was going to sound like. So even the things that are kind of improvisational sometimes accidentally get set. Do we have time for any more?
Honored to have the last question. Just as a follow-up question to some of these earlier questions regarding technology, and you also spoke of artistic sensibility, and for all these years that you've worked with technology for since the last century, I was just curious if you have anything to speak about how your artistic sensibility has maybe changed or evolved in relation to or influenced by the technology, and then how specifically also like relating to how the question the earlier question, like how the technology evolves so fast, right? And so just wanted to hear if you have anything to say about like this sort of your progression or how it changed over time.
Well, I love that question because it speaks to one thing that I always talk about, and I didn't have the opportunity in this particular talk to mention it, so I'm glad that you asked that question. One of my favorite things in making work is something that we like to call happy accidents. And these are those things that happen when you were trying to do one thing, but you didn't know what you were doing, so you made mistakes, and the mistakes end up being way more interesting than what it was that you were actually trying to do. And that happens to me all the time, especially when I'm working with something that maybe I hadn't worked with before. I've had, and every time a new sort of instrument or piece of technology gets introduced into my sort of arsenal of tools, I end up making really interesting new pieces because in trying to figure out how to use this thing, I screw up, and the screw ups are literally 10 times better than what I was trying to do with it. One example I can think of is when I first started working with video, it was because I had an artist residency somewhere, and I had made some sound installations in my studio that had to do with hanging sheets of metal flashing that I had put piezos on so that when the currents of air would slightly move these pieces of metal, it was then going through my sound system and then being processed and played through the speakers. And so when it was time for that residency to be over, I didn't want to lose that work, and so I decided I wanted to do a video documentation of it before I dismantled it. I didn't know how to use video cameras, and I borrowed a video camera from the foundation that had the residency program. And this was back in the days of like, I don't know, I think mini DV tapes, but and everything was still like 4:3 instead of 16:9. But in any case, and this was also predating iPhones or any kind of smartphones. Or even the ubiquitousness of flat displays. Everything video was being shown on like these CRT monitors that are like as deep as they are wide because of the tube. Anyways, I borrowed this camera from this organization, and I was just on my own trying to shoot documentation in my studio of this piece. And because I didn't know how to use a video camera, I was treating it like a still camera. And so I was like sometimes going, oh, turning it like, oh, this is a better like tall shot, and going back and forth. And so when it wasn't until I was done and I went to edit the documentation that I realized what I had done, that half of my footage was sideways. And so then I got the idea that it would be fun to make a 2-channel video installation. And I borrowed, for my final thing at that residency place, I borrowed 2 of these gigantic, CRT monitors from them, and I turned one of on the AV, cart on its side and used like that sort of nylon strapping stuff to strap it down so that it wouldn't fall over. And I had one monitor on its side and one monitor like this. And then I just edited 2 channels of video, and I ended up with this really interesting kind of 2-channel video installation with tall images and wide images, which I would have never thought of, but it was just out of need because I was like, what am I going to do with this sideways footage? But, that was just one of many, many things that have happened throughout and ever since then, I've become, I started working a lot with video and making a lot more video work. But I really feel like that first thing kind of excited me about, like, oh, you can do different things with video. I've also had situations where I had done all the programming for a bank of samples to be played by one of my gesture control instruments. And you have to make all kinds of decisions when you're doing this programming about, like, which note numbers are being triggered, what the range of the pitches are, all of that. And that all goes into the programming. And so at one point, I loaded up the wrong bank of samples, and then I started playing it with the presets for a completely different set of samples. And it just started chirping and making these very strange sounds, which were because all of these samples were like being transposed way up into a register that they didn't belong in. And I was like, oh, that is amazing. And then I ended up writing a piece that used this weird, like, detuned bank of samples, and it was so much more interesting than what it was that I was actually trying to do. So this stuff happens to me all the time. And so now I'm sorry, I've strayed from, I've forgotten exactly what your original question was, but I you know, you'll just have to accept this as the answer. Thank you.